and CEO of Jindal Financial Group, Dentistry Disrupted. His expertise covers not only practice management, but also has a strong foundation in both tax planning and wealth and risk analysis. His firm has grown to become the leading dental advisory firm in the country and continues to partner with thousands of dental professionals across North America in optimizing best strategies for growth using a proactive approach to the business of dentistry. On a personal note, and I know many of you feel the same, hundreds of you listening right now who know Vic, all consider him to be a close friend and rely on him for advice. It's very rare to come across an individual who's not only extremely talented and knowledgeable in their field, but possess the unique ability to connect with every single individual that they touch. Vic's not only humble, but has made it a goal to help and truly share with everybody around him, solidifying his status not only as an industry influencer, but largely a leader in the dental community. So it's an honor, as I mentioned, and a pleasure. Without further ado, I take great pride in introducing my good friend and continued mentor, Vic Jindal.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. Ellen, Les, thank you again for putting all this together. We're at about 500 plus people. I think we've got a huge record crowd here today. I feel really humble, to be honest with you right now. We are right now today, and we have between this morning and this afternoon, set a new Canadian record for Dental C for a webinar event. For the first time, I think we're gonna touch over 1,500 dentists across the country and participants around the world. So thank you again so much. Over the last 6 weeks, all of our lives have changed, and COVID has, in some respects, and in many respects, brought fear into the equation, and it's also brought opportunity into the equation. And what I'd like to do today is I'd like to answer the question, is this the death of dentistry? And focus in on where the financial side of where dentistry is headed. So what I want to do is take you through the agenda over here. And let me just get there, bear with me. Perfect. So there's going to be 7 sections that we're going to cover in this afternoon's talk. I'm going to speak to you guys for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to open up for some Q&A. I know we had hundreds and hundreds of questions coming in on the last session, so do my best to stick around a little bit longer to cover as much as we can. So the 7 topics we're going to cover right now are: what is the definition of a quarantine? I'm going to get into what is a black swan event and what that theory looks like. What's the new pandemic economy? Where is the dental industry today? Where it's been and what it looks like right now? Where are practice values going? What's your patient's mindset? And we're going to talk about pivoting. So these are the 7 things. And in order to do that, we have to look at the past, kind of establish where we were historically, then take a clear view of the present so that we can have some sort of guide map and roadmap for where we're going in the future. So let's get started, guys. I want to talk about what is, first of all, the definition of a quarantine. So it says here, as per Webster's, a period of isolation of people or animals to prevent the spread of disease, or isolate as if in quarantine. Now, quarantine, as I was reading about it, comes from the Italian word 40 giorni. And back in the 14th century, merchant ships that were coming into Venice, when they were also dealing with a time of pandemic, were asked to dock and anchor, but they couldn't leave their boat until they spent 40 days basically on boat waiting for their quarantine period. So again, in Italian to English, 40 giorni, meaning 40 days from your journey. This is an amazing slide from Visual Capitalist, and I want to give a shout out to them for, in my opinion, making one of the best pictorials of what the death toll has been historically over all of these different pandemic periods of time, going back over hundreds of years. In your top left-hand corner, you're going to see the 200 million people that were unfortunately taken from the bubonic plague, or also better known as Black Death. And you'll see in those years, 1347 to the year 1351. So can you imagine, in 4 years, 200 million people were taken from that plague at that time. Smallpox, again, about 150 years later, 200 years later, we're looking at 56 million people taken from that. The Spanish flu, which is often noted now when we talk about COVID today, the Spanish flu is often referenced. At that time, back 100 years ago, 40 to 50 million people were taken from that event. The plague of Justinian. So plagues and these viruses have been around for a long time. Almost 50 million people, again, were taken back in the year 500. So now you roll down to the bottom left-hand side over here, we've got AIDS and HIV, which is obviously still, we as a country are still dealing with AIDS and HIV, with about 25 to 35 million people affected from it right now. You look to the right side there, the Asian flu, the Russian flu, the Hong Kong flu, the cholera outbreak, all about 1 million people affected during their various time periods. Bottom right corner, Ebola, MERS, and SARS. We're looking at situations over there where you saw how horrific the disease was, but how few people were, thank goodness, affected by that. And then we get over here into COVID. And COVID right now, of course, this statistic I'm giving you is from April 17th, 2020, so just this past week. That number was 147,000 people. Today, that number is up to 167,000 people. Just in 3 days, 20 more thousand people have been infected by COVID-19. But when you look at this now on a historical basis, and we look at that number at 167 compared to all these other time periods, I hope it just gives you a little bit more perspective on where we're at with this particular one virus at this point in time. Now, when we look at the US Department of Labor and the ONET database, what they did is they came up with this really amazing stat. And the stat is basically saying the COVID-19 risk score, where does your job or your occupation rank in relation to your risk of getting COVID-19? And if we kind of look all the way to the left over here, I picked out 5 different professions over here. I picked out the economist. So an economist often socially isolating, working behind a desk, making predictions that are 50% true and 50% not. One of the perks of being an economist. You don't have to be right, your best guess. But they're 1.5 out of 100 on the risk scale, so extremely low. You then move over to web developers, again, working in a lot of isolation at points in time, 12.5 out of 100 on the risk scale. Accountants, you're a tax accountant, those accountants that are tuning in today, you're 20.5 out of 100 on the scale. Now, obviously, in purple, you guys as dentists, 92.1 out of 100. That is how much at risk you are for contraction of COVID without proper protection and diligence. And number 1 out of all measured occupations, hygienists at 99.7% out of 100, or 99.7 points, I should say, out of 100. Crazy stats, but important for you to understand that the risk is real, and certainly this is where the numbers take us. So Google tells us that the global population right now is 7.8 billion people on this beautiful blue bubble. And if you think about COVID, of course, about 167,000 people are affected by it globally right now, making it a pandemic disease. What's the real disease on the planet right now? Untreated tooth decay. Untreated tooth decay is affecting 3.9 billion people on the planet right now. It ranks number 1 on the Global Burden of Diseases Index. So if you're worried about not having a job, or if the dental industry or the profession of dentistry is going to not need your services post-COVID, I'm going to suggest to you 3.9 billion people on planet Earth are looking to talk to you or have you help them. That is how big the disease is. So I'm going to jump now over into what is a black swan event and the black swan theory. So a black swan event is a surprise event that has a major effect. The outcome is very hard to predict, and it has hindsight rationalization. So what do I mean by that? Well, who thought we'd be all locked up and locked down in our homes and offices 6 weeks ago? Couldn't even imagine. Even though we were following these stats and watching it happen in Wuhan, China, we still, the vast majority of us were still thinking, no, it's not going to affect our lives. We're good here in North America. It's not going to be a big deal. And we went about our business, even though we watched it and watched those numbers happen. Has it had a major effect? Well, I would say so. I mean, really, when have you ever seen in modern day history the world shut down? And we're talking about the entire planet. The outcome is very hard to predict. To a degree it is. We don't know how long this is going to last. We have our best guesses as we all do what we need to do with flattening the curve and socially and individually isolating. These are the right things to do. And the other big point of a black swan theory is hindsight rationalization, meaning someday when we are post-COVID and we look back at this time period, we will start to very clearly see the things we did right, the things that we should have done better, the things we did wrong, and will all make sense to us, but only in hindsight. We will have to be past this point to really have great clarity over what we could have done differently and how we can better prepare ourselves if should we ever have an event like this again in the future. This is a newspaper article from October 24th, 1929. This is the Brooklyn Daily. And the headline at that time on that day was "Wall Street in Panic as Stocks Plummet. An attempt was made to kill Italy's crown prince. Fires, floods, theft, vandalism. I mean, it was a rough time. And of course, the time I'm talking about and referencing over here is the Great Depression of 1929. And this is the economic period and the time of period in life that people sometimes will still look back on today, even though we look at modern economic portfolio theory and we think about how bad it was at that time. Just think about this. This is a scene from a photograph in New York City in 1929. And you can see nobody is practicing social distancing in any metric, but what you're looking at here is people in complete and total panic and fear, because the banks that they had their deposits in have gone bankrupt and they have no money left when they go into that bank because the bank has closed its doors and the money is gone. You're looking at massive job loss that's just unreal. I'm talking about at a percentage that's never ever seen before in history. Complete and total financial collapse in every possible way. And you would hear or you'll read about, of course, the suicide rate, the mental toll of what this time was. And understand one very important thing: we as a society and we as an economy got past this point and things went on to be unbelievable. But at the moment in time that you're in it, it's hard to look past it. I love this picture when I came across it. $100 will buy you this car. Must have cash, lost all my money on the stock market. I can only imagine what this vehicle is worth today if we had it in that condition. But imagine people with wealth at that time were so panicked because even then at that point in time, everybody was affected by this. No one was immune. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this particular chart because I think it's so important. So many questions that have hit us from the thousands of you that have messaged over the last 6 weeks have talked about where are we? Like, how does this rank compared to other time periods economically right now and other stock periods right now? And how does this affect, again, my dental practice and my real estate values? So again, let me take you to the very left side of the slide over here. And we're going to look at the Israel-Arab War, the oil embargo. The stock market, the S&P, the Dow Jones, you can really universally look at many markets, fell 17.1%. And that negative period lasted for 1,475 days, so for about 4 years. And 4 years later, you'll see the line that's kind of squiggly and going up over here. It recovered. Then, October 5th, 1979, we had the Iranian hostage crisis. Market dropped 10.2%, lasted for 51 days, recovered again. You'll see highlighted over there, October 13th, 1987, Black Monday. And I remember this day historically because it was such a jarring reality of what had happened. You saw the stock market in a single day drop 20% and 28.5% over its time period. So I'm talking about, let me use a big number, $1 million. If you had $1 million, in most cases, you had just finished losing $285,000 of your money or your wealth, and it was eviscerated very quickly. Now you had three choices. Choice number one was you sell, and you happily take 70 cents on the dollar or less. You had the choice of holding, or you could be the one that's buying. And in Warren Buffett's example, of course, being one of the best and probably most successful value-based investor in modern day history, the advice is always invest when people are fearful and be mindful when people are euphoric. And this is kind of what Black Monday was. It only lasted 398 days in total. It was even shorter than that when you think about most of its recovery happened very quickly, but the entire period was just over a year. And I tell you, at that time, it felt like it was going to last forever. The Gulf War, 5.7 negative, 11.6 on 9/11. SARS, remember when I pointed out a moment ago over here, what limited number of people were affected by SARS globally, yet it dropped the market 14.1%. Lasted for 40 days. Now, the global financial crisis, which is now labeled today, comparing it to the Great Depression, it was called the Great Recession. It lasted for 2.8 years. You'll see it at the top of your screen there, 1,022 days. The global financial crisis at that time dropped the S&P 56.8%. Let's put this in perspective again. If you had $1 million portfolio, you lost $568,000 of your worth literally in very quick order. And again, same three choices. Do I sell? Do I hold? Do I invest? And again, all the people that held, or certainly the people that invested, they enjoyed in many cases some of the greatest economic gains that they've had ever in again, the last 100 years. Libyan crisis, Brexit vote, 9 days, 5.6%. And here we are now, February the 19th, 2020. And I remember that day again, because it was only 6 weeks ago, and how euphoric we all felt, of course, in all aspects. Unemployment was at record lows. You're looking at the stock market at record highs. You're looking at real estate that you could not obtain, people sleeping in tents in front of trailers to try and be able to obtain the privilege of being able to purchase a home. And dental practices going for unbelievable bids, 20, 30, 40, 50 bidders bidding at unbelievable numbers to be able to have an acquisition. This was our world 6 weeks ago. COVID happens, market drops 29.5%. Again, if we're going to put it in the $1 million context, you're down from $1 million down to $700,000. Keep in mind though, and I want to really take this point home, look at where we were in 1973 and look at where we were 6 weeks ago. Like that number went from like 250 to like 3,500, like past 3,000. Like that is how much economic gain there's been over this period of time. So it's not that people are like, my goodness, like what a horrible thing has happened and I'm wrecked forever. This is temporary. And the market has already recovered. A little bit of good, news over here on the flattening of the curve, on some innovations with some of the drug trials today, and the market's already recovered about 10%, and we're now about -20 today on the open market. Still lots of amazing opportunities to invest, but this time will pass and it will keep on going up in the future. There's a new acronym, it's called BEACH, and the BEACH companies are the booking companies like Expedia.com, the entertainment companies like Disney and Live Nation. You've got the airlines like Air Canada, American Airlines, WestJet, your cruise companies like Carnival, your casinos like Las Vegas Sands, and of course your hotels like Marriott and so many of the sister partners that they have that way. All of these companies, of course, wrecked right now. Wrecked to the point they're never going to come back? Well, I don't think so. They're for sure going to come back. But they're going to come back in a delayed, lagged way because all of you, or the majority of you, canceled your vacations. You've canceled your trips. You've put your weddings on hold. The concerts that you bought tickets for, again, on hold. All of these things are still going to return. And in some respects, you might say they're going to return in an even bigger way as people will really greatly value all of these experiences. But there is going to be a lag and delay, and these are the companies that have been affected the most right now during COVID. I referenced this, calling it the Great Lockdown. And this is an amazing, again, visual capitalist slide. Looking at stagflation in 1975, the Volcker tightening of 1980, the double dip recession of 1982. You look at the early 90s, and each one of these periods, the dot-com bust even the Great Recession, actually, all of these events in the past led to about 2.3 million people being unemployed. And that's been the aggregate average for all of these periods. But here we are today right now with COVID, and we were at 22 million people at the time of, again, writing this. And we're looking at a 10-time higher peak than any of these other points except the Great Depression. So what we're looking at right now is the relative to 1929, we would need about 41 million people to be unemployed today in order to be equivalent to the 22 million people that we have on the unemployment list right now. So long way to go before we hit Great Depression type of numbers. We're about halfway there, and we might hit it depending on where it all flattens out. But keep in mind how this event is different than all the other ones is this was sudden. This was forcing people to stay at home for, again, social distancing and not spreading, again, the contagion of the disease. However, this is where it's at right now. So we've had development of something called the pandemic economy. So if you look at the online retail sales, this is now a number from 6 weeks ago, pre-COVID. And online retail sales were projected to be $6.5 trillion by 2023. That is a big number as you see people moving away in the shrinkage of, again, big box stores and moving all more and more onto online platforms such as Amazon. You're seeing this. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that this 6-week COVID period has ramped and accelerated this number. We could be looking at over $10 trillion of transactions going into 2023 or beyond. It is heightened and exponentially forced in many ways, but also amplified the ability to shop online. So what is the pandemic economy then? Well, it's what's in your cart. No shock or surprise, disposable gloves and the online purchase of them and consumption of them up 670% since COVID. Toilet paper on purchases, I'm not going to say consumption, up 190%. Check out the middle, bread makers, 652% increase in bread maker purchases, sold out for many makes and models online almost on every platform. Unbelievable how many bakers came out to say, hey, it's time for me to make bread now. No shock again on the detractors. We're looking at gym bags, negative 57% on the purchases, men's and ladies swimwear, and of course, luggage down 77% year over year. So interesting stats over there when you talk about this new pandemic economy and the companies that are thriving in it. I'm gonna take a guess that a lot of you know who this particular gentleman is. His name is Mr. Jeffrey Bezos. Mr. Bezos recently made a purchase of a home in Los Angeles to add to his real estate portfolio. Home was purchased for $165 million in Beverly Hills, California. And for all the amazing things that Mr. Bezos is doing with the company that he founded, Amazon.com, the one thing that he hasn't been able to figure out and deliver yet is Amazon can't provide dental services, oral surgery, recall exams, implants, veneers, can't do it, can't deliver it. So you're still in an extremely, extremely safe place in a non-Amazon type of service that you're in. So I'm going to now jump to the dental industry. So when we look at the industry, Canadian revenue in relation to the total economy is $15 billion. That is how much is generated from dental just in this country. You think about it, 37.5 million Canadians, $15 billion of revenue from it alone. US size, not shocking. In the US, we're dealing with about 10 times larger population. We're dealing with about 10 times the US revenue at $117 billion annualized. Interesting stat, 32% of patients in Canada are uninsured right now. And this was, again, I'm going to say pre-COVID. Now, when you look at that, fairly big number, what was interesting when I went back and I looked at the aggregate data going back into the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and right up until 6 weeks ago, that number has been very stable. It's fluctuated between 28 and 33%, and right now, again, about 32% pre-COVID as far as the uninsured population. 35% of the global population over age 65 are edentulous and have no teeth of any kind. Imagine that, a third of the world over age 65, no teeth. What's that number look like in North America? It's down to 6%. Now, if you think, oh man, that is not great to hear if I'm a dentist wanting to place implants and do restorative type of work, I will tell you that 6% of the North American population and certainly 6% of the Canadian demographic is a huge number. It is so massive. And it's one of the fastest growing demographics, of course, as our North American population, our Canadian population gets older. So there is a huge need for, again, this level of dentistry, which is going to be coming down the pipe. This slide is depicting, again, strictly for those of you that are in Canada tuning in live right now. This is really looking at where we are right now in Canada. There are, at last very recent stat, 23,592 dentists licensed to practice in Canada. The median age of the dentist in this country right now is 51 years of age. And you'll notice, of course, that 12,000, half of all the dentists in this country, happen to be practicing in Ontario, Canada, with a huge number of them actually in the Greater Toronto area. Now, everybody is always on different levels of how many patients can they look after and service with quality care, not the factory approach. So if we're looking at quality care, many people will suggest to you, you need about 1,500 active patients to be able to look at through one practitioner. So the Canadian average right now of population to dentist ratio is about 1,621. So we're about right on. If you think that there's too many dentists in the country, there actually isn't. I know it feels that way sometimes, especially if you're a newly graduated dentist and you think, my goodness, there's already so many dentists everywhere I look, on every corner. How is there any space for me? But there's still, as Canada's population is growing through immigration, through, again, all the different ways that we still continue to grow our population. You're still looking at BC being, of course, the most saturated at 1,385 patients per practitioner. Ontario is not very far behind at 1,428. You've got the Yukon territories at 1,442, but that's because they're really legit, or hardly any dentists there, or hardly any people living there. And then you swing all the way over to the other side over here in New Brunswick and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland. And we've got some people tuning in over here from Corner Brook, Newfoundland today. And 2,604 patients per practitioner, and they're begging for you out there. So for those of you that are willing to consider going to outside of the major cities over here, huge needs for your services. So let's talk about production over here. 74% of dentists 74% of Canadians see a dentist at least one time per year. So 3 out of 4. 22% of Canadians do not go, and the number one reason they don't go to see a dentist is due to cost. A big chunk of those 22%, of course, also don't have any dental insurance. Now, here's what's really cool, I'm going to say, about the dental profession. Of those 24,000 people that are practicing in this country, for, again, 37.5 million Canadians, only 24,000 in practice licensed, there's an extremely high barrier to participate. You have to study, you have to go to school, you have to get licensed, or you have to get direct license through, again, an accredited program. And as you go through all of that licensing, all of that study, get out, pass all these board exams, and get ready to go, it's a very small club, extremely small. You can see how small it is. So the high barrier to entry and participation is amazing for you because it's a very closed, captive market. Low capital investment of $600,000 to start. Now, I'm not belittling the value of $600,000, but I'm trying to give you a little bit of perspective that the banks are really open for business right now. And they want to still continue to partner and grow with you right now in discussions with many of the banking heads across the country. And it is different here in Canada than the US or other countries. They're still really supporting growth. And that is an amazing opportunity. If you borrowed $600,000 today at the rate right now of about 2%, it's going to cost you $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year of interest to create something that can be worth and produce millions of dollars. So phenomenal return on your investment to continue to grow and invest inside this industry. Now, this is a question we were asked this morning. We keep getting asked, of course, by thousands of you throughout the last 6 weeks. What's going to happen when the patients come back, or will they come back? And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes as we go further in the slides. But I do want to tell you that it's our belief that there's going to be a temporary elective curbing of services due to lower discretionary incomes, which makes sense. I mean, the people that right now didn't have insurance before and that were paying out of pocket, or the people that were, again, insured and paying out of pocket, or any combination of it, they're feeling the brunt of this right now. Of course they are, right? So many Canadians are, of course, on employment insurance at this time, taking 55% of their normal salary. Or many people are, again, completely earning no income. So the necessities of what they need will come first. But again, I'm going to call this a temporary curbing. It's not a permanent curbing. We know the trends will always continue back upwards. And when I, again, looked at all the data going backwards over long periods of time, and I'm talking like decades and decades. And looking at production reports going back into the 70s, 1978, 82, 87, when we had Black Monday, 93, going into, again, right through the last Great Recession, what we found over and over and over again is historically low volatility across all measurable time periods. It wasn't that your practice completely hemorrhaged and it didn't recover. It was very low vol. How low? The average median drop in production was 8% during a recession. Now, this is a key point that I want to kind of focus in on. Hygiene is lost revenue depending on how long a downturn is. So right now, if we were to reopen tomorrow, all of those hygiene appointments that you had based on insurance, based on need and so forth, all flooding back in. Again, if COVID was behind us completely in every way. So think of hygiene as lost revenue if we go too long until you get to your next recall. But think of restorative as deferred revenue, not lost revenue, because that's exactly what it is. The people that still want those crowns, implants, and veneers, or anything else that they need along the way, that's still deferred because there's still a need. The recessionary effect on dental insurance. So, as I was mentioning, about 32% of the Canadian population has no insurance. 68% are insured or are paying out with cash. 17% drop in the insured base is the median drop during, again, these recessionary times. There was a question asked this morning as well. Do we think that Alberta is going to be, or where's Alberta's place in all this? We do believe, unfortunately for Alberta, that it's going to be more adversely affected compared to all the other provinces in Canada. And this is due, of course, to the energy and the oil and gas sector that is a major part of the province of Alberta's economy. But the outlook is still positive in the sense that as we recover through, again, these prices and consolidation of market, you'll see this come back the other way. So one other key point over here, as the economy recovers, insured population typically returns to work in about 18 months. So keep in mind that I've just really highlighted there that it's the 17% drop in insurance patients only for about 18 months. The rest of your population base all still solid and good. This is another big question, and this is on everybody's minds right now. Where are practice valuations in Canada in the past? Where are they now? And where are they going? And has my practice value dropped? Or am I going to get a great deal if I want to buy a practice today? So I'm going to try and give you some clear perspective of where we were. If I go back to 25 years ago when I had started my career, we used to use this rule of thumb, and I'm going to call it a rule of thumb, called the percentage of gross. And it was a very arbitrary number, just rooted in just the idea of what should you roughly think that you're supposed to pay for a practice. So I'm going to use the example of $1 million. If we had $1 million gross in production practice, back in the day, you were looking at paying about 50 to 60% of that in purchase costs, meaning $500,000 to $600,000. That number then started to creep up, again, using the percentage of gross. It started to creep into the 65. I remember when it hit 70, when it hit 75. I remember when it hit 100. We're like, wow, 100% of gross, like that happened pretty quickly. 110, 120. A practice recently traded hands now for over 270% of its gross billings. And that was not long ago. So again, it's a rule of thumb, but again, this is just trending, and it's a supply and demand problem. You got, again, 24,000 of you guys and not enough practices, 15,000 practices, best guess right now, operating in all of the country. So demand is there and continues to be there. The multiple of net income, this idea was how much should you pay for the net? So if you had $1 million of gross, let's pretend 50% overhead, $500,000 left over. Are you paying 1 times that, 2 times that, 3 times that, 4 times that? What's the multiple? And then a lot of you are now getting educated on this term called EBITDA. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And it's, again, maybe a more scientific way or a more mathematical equation to be able to try and get into established value of a practice. There's so many adjustments, and we defer to professional practice valuators to truly establish value. But this is just giving you an idea. Now, here's a supposition. Do we believe that in 6 weeks ago that the market was running into a supply problem? Yes, crazy supply problem. Do we think that the supply problem is going to continue? We do. Why is that? Let's suppose you had 3 assets right now. Some of you may, I'm going to use a generic example of, you had a $2 million home, you had a $2 million stock portfolio, and you had a practice worth $2 million. Now, if I said to you, your house, depending on where it's located in the country, has lost 10% of its value, your value is now down from 2 million down to 1.8 million. Your stock portfolio, depending on what time period you're looking at, is down between 20 and 30%, depending on, again, what you're invested in. So again, if you're down 30%, let me use a really bad number, you're down from the 2 million down to 1.4 million, again, temporarily. What's your practice worth today? That $2 million. I'm still going to suggest to you it's still worth $2 million. And the question is, and I asked this question of many of you that are logged in today, and of course, over the last 6 weeks that we've been having all these conversations, would you sell me your dental practice that was worth $2 million 6 weeks ago for $1.4 million today? Can I take it off your hands at a 30% discount? I've yet to have a dentist in the country, not even one, suggest to me they would gladly take a 30% cut in the pre-COVID value of their practice. So, supply-demand problem continues. The majority of the asset value inside your practice is your charts, your goodwill. The more established that your practice is, the healthier those patient relationships are. That's where you're getting predominant value in that goodwill. If you're looking after your patients in the past, and you're certainly continuing to look after your patients, connect with them right now. What an opportunity to call, reach out personally with your team. What a great time to start your social media interactions with, again, the people around you, using platforms like Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different ways, and how so many of us have all connected to each other as you got here to today's webinar. Practice values have doubled since 2009's Great Recession. In some cases, I'm going to suggest to you they've tripled. Pre-COVID massive shortages of practices available to purchase. There'll be still minimal change in availability post-COVID. I strongly believe that. I believe that's my opinion going forward. And I'm going to put a big asterisk around this last point, professional valuation with a red star. See, if we assume that if you've had a practice for, let's say, 25 years, and all previous 24 years leading up to this year were stable or growing all the time, and you had a couple of extra vacation periods in between a few years, but overall you had an upline trend, and all of a sudden the entire world is shut down today, and of course your production goes to zero. Does that mean your practice value is hemorrhaged down to nothing? It has not. It's simply going to be the responsibility of you and your professional valuator at the point in time you do decide to do a transition, a sale, or anything else in between, to understand that this is something that needs to be accounted for with the asterisks. But it is not a foregone conclusion that it's eroded or eviscerated your practice equity. You're going to recognize some of the people over here. I'm going to do some shout outs for a minute. I'm going to talk about the value of a patient being $21,000. We've got my business partner, Dr. Manisha Jindal, on the top left over there, rockstar orthodontist here in Canada. We've got Glenn Manchester, who's a dentist that constantly gives back with outreach programs. We have Rachel McKay, who's become an influencer of her own in a very short period of time, using the power of social media and connecting with all of her peeps around her. We've got Dr. Hisham Shergan, who at the age of 35 has built and amassed a huge following of not only patients but and practitioners, but is leading this charge here across the country on educating. We've got Dr. Mian Quick, who had recently given a webinar talking about, again, practice efficiency. Mike Rondinelli, who's been doing great things again in his neck of the woods over there, continuing to grow. It's Dr. Sumner. We've got Dr. Carrier. We've got our good friend over here right now when we look at Dr. Jason Adinata, who at the age of 34 is blowing things up as the 416 dentist. We've got Chris Bierstorff over there, of course, who many of you know, leading the way here in Canada for Dentsply Sirona. We've got Azim Sheikh, who was so kind to do introductions, in the top 5% of practice practitioners, production-wise, having done over 4,000 implants in his young career so far. Some of you may know Gordon Chi, who's all over Instagram as we speak on a regular basis, doing some of the finest dental photography and showcasing it and teaching others how to use the power of the camera. We've got Mr. Sylvain Chesson, who still has been leading the way here for Patterson Dental. What do all of these people share in common? There's a common thread between every one of these people. They are extremely positive about the future of dentistry, and they're all individually rock stars doing exactly what they're doing. In fact, in many cases, the very best of the best out of the 24,000 that we're talking about. So where's the value of a patient at $21,000? I'm going to suggest to you that if you have a 20-year life cycle of your average median patient, and that patient over that 20 years gives you about $20,000 of production, or not production, sorry, profit, between ortho and pros and pedo and endo and impacted eights, like you name it. Whatever you're doing over a 20-year cycle is on average aggregated out to be about $20,000 of profit. And if you were selling that patient chart today, average market value about $1,000, hence the $21,000 value per patient. Now, the average practice in Canada gets 5 new patients a month. And it's funny how this number hasn't really moved. It's been very much that. And the practices that are getting about five new patients a month, a lot of them are getting them coming in organically, which is again a great way to get it from existing patients. The days of the yellow page advertising are done. But I can tell you that there's a cohort of dentists, and they're the rock stars right now, that are all about growing, but growing right, that have optimized their practices to have over 100 new patients per month. Let me try and break that down again. 100 new patients every single month at $21,000 per patient on the life cycle value of that. Can you imagine what the opportunity is going forward if you actually focus on optimization and look at all the need that's not going away? So what's the patient mindset right now? This is continued. 82% of patients consider location to be an important point in choosing a dentist. If you're geographically within 15 minutes of where somebody lives, that's a huge, huge perk to them wanting to select you as their provider if they have no other reason to go to anybody else. 60% of patients don't want to change their dentist. This has been, again, a proven statistic that even with mediocre relationships with the patients, and I'm going to say just so-so dentistry and quality of care, 60% will still stick. 34% of patients have been with the same dentist for over a decade, which means a third are there, but that means 2/3 are still openly in play over periods of time. Dissatisfaction with their current dental team is the #1 reason of patient movement. And it's not just you clinically as a dentist, it's all the people on your team and around you. You are all setting one example for each other. And this is, again, the reason for bleed, hence the importance of why you have to consistently work on improving it and optimizing it. The science of patient communication. Harvard Business Review did a study, and I've just picked out 3 points that seem salient and relevant to me. The principle of authority. Patients will defer to experts. In today's day and age right now, where we all are connected, of course, online, we're watching YouTube, we're checking our Google reviews, we're trying to figure out what's going on right now with which restaurant I'm going to pick when I'm on vacation and which Disney ride is the most fun to have. The principle of authority is that people will still continue to defer to experts where necessary. The principle of social proof. Patients follow the lead of similar others, meaning if you have an existing patient and they're happy and they become a source of referral for you, people will follow. They become influencers in their own way because, of course, their happiness. And the principle of liking. Patients like those who like them. If your world is just all about the clinical experience and there's not enough happiness involved in your day-to-day patient interaction, your team interaction, I feel like we're missing something that's so important, especially as we go forward right now, where the likability of you, the likability of your environment, and the likability of your brand is going to become so paramount to, again, high growth. Dental patient media consumption. I know you guys have heard this before. I know I want to talk about it one more time again, because I want to drive this home. This is, again, a future-based stat. 35% of Gen Xers right now are on YouTube pretty much every day. 44% of Gen Ys, the millennials, who are right now age 24 to 37, they're spending almost half their time on YouTube when they're connected, on a daily basis. And Gen Zs, the 16 to 23, the up-and-comers over here, 51% of the time connected in some form to YouTube, and specifically connected for 2 hours a day on YouTube with 10 hours a day of internet connectivity. 70% of those people, again, as they're connected to YouTube, they're looking at content in a variety of different ways. 80% feel distressed when they're away from their mobile device, and 92% of this cohort have a digital footprint. And if I suggested to you how many practitioners and practices in the country of Canada and going into the United States have no digital footprint. There's not a website, there's no Instagram, there's no LinkedIn, there's no nothing. It's so hard to find you. And how is that when your up and coming next demographic over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is exclusively, almost exclusively focusing on this form of communication? Earlier, I talked about the fact that there's going to be 5 categories of patients. The emergency patient, that's who I want to talk about first. These are the patients that you're seeing them right now because they are in pain and they need to see you today, or the people that are waiting that as soon as you reopen up full time, they're coming right back because they need to. The insured and cash plus confident. So these are people that are either insured or they have, again, cash disposable means combined together. They feel confident. So what I mean by that is you're back open for business. You've explained what your environment is in a way that it's safe from a PPE perspective, and or COVID is completely now inoculated and we have no more pandemic problem. All of those people will be back quickly. We have then the insured and cash and non-confident. They have the insurance, they have the financial means, they want to come back, they're not confident to come back, and there will be a lag for those particular patients. What that lag might be, it's everybody's best guess right now, but I'm going to suggest to you it might be a couple of months, not a couple of years. And a couple of months will just be like, hey, you know, why don't you go and then I'll go. Oh, both of the 3 of you went, great, now it's my time, I can go now too. So again, just building up a little bit of confidence to go back into routine. And the 4th category is our financially delayed. Those are the people that need to see you, want to see you, but they just don't have economic means in order to see you. The insurance is not there, hence that 32% of the population, or the people that have been affected post-COVID. So consideration for picking and choosing how you might want to consider some payment plans, some assignment, how you could financially help those people to seek and get the treatment that they need and that you'd like to deliver. So those are your 4 post-COVID categories of patients. This guy you all know. I'm sure that there's not a person tuning in right now that doesn't know Mr. Bill Gates, one of the pioneers and forward thinkers of I'm going to say, all-time history, as he built Microsoft. Now, I find it interesting that Mr. Gates, 5 years ago, and you can find this again on YouTube, he did a video, and it was an interview, I think, where he got into what scares him when he thinks about the future. And he said, war doesn't scare me. World War III is not what I'm most worried about. What I'm worried about, he said 5 years ago, is a pandemic that we're not prepared for, that we're not testing for, that we don't know how to deal with and plan for. And it's so ironic that here we are 5 years later, and as they've interviewed him now again today, his thoughts are so salient and relevant. So, like Mr. Gates, what's some advice? Don't be afraid of this time. Instead, adapt to this time. You have this gift right now of time right now. And what that gift is unbelievable, where there's new PPE requirements that will inevitably be there. What they are, we're not going to guess what they look like, but they will be different. There's an opportunity to update your clinic. It might not just be PPE required updates, it might be technology updates. And why wouldn't you invest in the thing that, and in this opportunity with the time again you have to be able to grow your practice and do new and innovative things for all of your patients and with your team. You have the power and the ability to use Zoom. We broke a Canadian record today. And what I mean by that is there were over 1,500 of you that decided that you're going to want to tune in and dial into this and share this from around the world. 6 weeks ago, how could we ever even imagine that we'd have the power of this form of connectivity? And yet here we are. Invest in yourself. Choose CE. Choose to exercise. 85% of you are now exercising at home, and 55% of you plan on carrying on that practice even after we're post-COVID. Invest in your practice and do the things that give you that ability that we didn't have 6 weeks ago, which is take advantage of this time to appreciate and enjoy the life that we had and all the exciting opportunity that we have going forward. So let me start getting towards the conclusion here. Is this the death of dentistry? Well, it isn't. COVID's going to pass. Stocks are going to recover. Patients are going to return to see you. Jobs will definitely increase. Insurance levels will recover back to normal. Demand remains the same. 3.9 billion people will tell you so. Practice values are absolutely stable. We'll go through some bumps. They're not down. And we have to pivot, and we have to choose to look ahead at this opportunity to pivot. What is opportunity? It's a favorable juncture of circumstance, a good chance for advancement or progress. And that's what we have, guys. Not a lost opportunity, but a made opportunity for us. I'm going to encourage you guys to take a picture or a screenshot of this one over here. So many of you are reaching out to us on a regular basis, and there's so much more content that we're going to be delivering to you in the coming days, weeks, and months to follow. And we're going to really encourage you to again, connect with us on any form of media that you like. We love Instagram. So many of you that are, again, joining us this morning, this afternoon, and going forward are using the power of Instagram right now to connect. If you've never opened up or created an Instagram profile, I'm going to suggest that each and every one of you take some time to maybe watch a YouTube video on how to open up an Instagram page and see how powerful this is. So we're going to really try and deliver some great content to you in the coming days and weeks using that particular platform. You can find us and find me at Vic Jindal over there. LinkedIn, again, powerful way, thousands and thousands and thousands of you. I think I'm connected right now to over 4,000 of you just through, again, the power of LinkedIn globally. YouTube, you can visit us on Dentistry Disrupted, where we have a lot of great content already loaded up on there, and that's going to be the platform where we deliver new speakers and advice to you. And again, you can subscribe and hit the subscribe button there, or you can use traditional email and email me at vic@jindalfinancial.com. So we really are going to encourage you to reach out to us, hit us up today, and we will do our best to reach back out to you as fast as possible, including today. In closing, I want to do some shout outs. An event like this is unbelievable behind the scenes to produce and create. I want to really start off by thanking Dentsply Sirona and Patterson Dental for all the effort that they put into making this happen. Mr. Christoph Biersdorf leading the team here again across the country. Victor, Ellen, who has been a rock star 7 days a week, texting me back and forth on content, on updates, on tech, everything that you do. Ellen, huge shout out to you. You have absolutely delivered all the content that's necessary and made it all happen. Marie Ebner, who pulled a 5 a.m.er to get some media content delivered out. Thank you so much for your effort. Cynthia, Charlene, Kelly Kimball, Elaine Ratcliffe, who has been a huge cheerleader on all platforms. Les, the man who's working in the control room right now. Man, it's been such an honor to work with you on this particular new platform. And thanks for making everything so seamless and easy for all of us connecting around the world. Stan C, man, what a cheerleader and promoter for Dentsply Sirona. Thanks for your continued enthusiasm for our industry. In Patterson, again, Sil Chesson leading the team. Dan Begin, thank you so much. Dan had messaged me just a few hours ago while we had our break in between. Appreciate all of your work. And Dean Callan, who has been a 25-year partner to our firm and continues to do amazing stuff. Azim Sheikh, thanks again, Azim, for the shout out and the very warm intro. Your friendship means a lot, and very proud to see and watch you grow and do all the things you've done right now, and the leadership that you have for all of our industry here right now. Tremendous amount of time that you invest. Gordon Shee, Gordon, man, huge shout out to you for being an IG influencer and really doing some phenomenal things as you continue to teach and grow and elevate all of the dental profession. Dr. Heesh Shergan, what can I say about Heesh? Man, you are, this is the guy that works 21 to 22 hours a day, 7 days a week. When people ask me about this guy and they're like, how does he do what he does? Leading a team of, I think, arguably hundreds of employees right now, partners, team members, webinars with Dentistry Academy, you name it. He continues to give it and give it with passion. So, man, continue to do what you do. Dr. Manisha Jindal, who's one of my best friends and certainly a huge help in today's content creation. None of this is possible without friends and family, and a huge shout out to her. And I have to acknowledge Dr. Jason Adinata. Jason, for those of you who watched the dentistry or the Death of Dentistry promo video, that was something that I had this idea of trying to create a rockstar video, bugged up Jason and said, man, can you help me do this thing? And if you haven't seen what he did, it's 40 seconds of brilliance. Like This guy is a dentist who did that. So check out Dentistry Disrupted promo video and you'll see Jason's work on there. Lastly, I got to thank out Amanda Palumbo, Erica Fawcett, Shannon Duncan, Caitlin Darby. All of these people are on our team over at JFG. You continue to babysit me and look after all of our clients in unbelievable ways. Thanks for all that you do. And a last huge special shout out to Emily Inson, who's my PR manager and social media advisor and consultant. She is behind the scenes, constantly working to make sure everybody's getting connected across all platforms. With that, guys, we're ready for questions. Thank you so much again for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to catching up with all of you in the days and weeks to come. You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. So before we open for questions, just a little bit of housekeeping here, especially on the CE side. Everybody who registered for this session will get a recording 24 hours after the end of this webinar, and we will be sending CE letters for everybody who attended to this live session. Please post your questions in our key and answer session, and right now I will be picking questions and giving it to Vic for him to answer to us. Okay? So just 1 second, I'll put you on the spotlight again. Can you hear me well, Vic?
Absolutely, I'm all good to go, Ellen.
Okay, so again, I would like to thank you for joining us today. We peaked at 670 people. So it was really an honor to have you here in our DS webinar gathering information. So first question, so actually it's not a question. Jackie from ROI Corporation, thank you for reminding people about the value in practices. We have officially stated that practice values have not been reduced due to COVID-19.
Fantastic. Jackie, thanks so much for the question. It's so good to hear from you. Jackie and the team over at Roy Corporation, of course, with Tim Brown and the gang, they understand this. And this is so encouraging to hear that they share our sentiment that practice values remain strong and will continue to remain strong. As I said earlier, that asterisk will go on to the valuations when we look at year 2020, but it's so good to reiterate the fact that the professional health will should. So thank you again for the question, Jackie.
What would insurance companies do about the raised cost of patient turnover? Also, the slowdown of production due to the new PPE requirements.
Sorry, Alan. So I just want to clarify the question. So the cost of new PPE requirements translated back to the patients?
I believe so. I will read it again. What would insurance companies do about the raised cost of patient turnover? Also, the slowdown of production due to new PPE requirements.
So I'm going to suggest to you that from a compensation standpoint, the insurance companies, unless the employer changes the limits, the insurance companies are going to remain the same on their limits post-COVID. So as an example, I'm just going to use an arbitrary, many dental plans out there will cover $1,000 to $1,500 every 6 to 9 months for recall and annualized type of work. So we believe those limits will probably stay the same. And it'll be up to the industry and dentists to try and work within those parameters unless employers look to raise those limits in the future. Thanks for the question.
Do you see dentistry becoming socialized as a result of this pandemic?
I hope not, but you know, over the years, this has been a tremendous topic of conversation because depending on who's in political power, of course, this ebbs and flows. Right now, when we talk to all the political powers that be, there's absolutely no wish in Ottawa to socialize dentistry, and it is our thought and strong belief that it will not be going down the path of being socialized. So while it could happen, I would say the probability of that sometime in the near to mid-future is incredibly low. Thanks for the question.
My practice was just recently valued 1 month prior to COVID. I've been told that by the valuator that this is the best time to put it on market as post-COVID, the value will be lower. What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. I'm going to step back on that question because it's such a powerful one. When you're looking at the transition of your practice, whether it's in a partnership capacity or full sale, or you're partnering with the DSO or whatever your model is for you it has to be based on the fact that you're ready for it. Don't let it be completely value driven right now by trying to maximize sale price. I don't think that's necessarily, this is my opinion again, the reason that you should be exiting or down, like kind of dialing down on your clinical ownership. That being said, we still feel that right now, yes, people are desperate to buy. It's if you listed, you would still have a lot of people wanting to buy it. But I don't think you're going to be having to worry about getting a fire sale price. Low offers are not going to be part of the equation. How I say that with confidence to you, just to wrap up this question, when I look at the thousands of dentists across the country that we connect with on a weekly basis, I can tell you that I've got a whole bunch of people that want to buy and a nothing list of people that want to sell. It's like nothing. And during all of these times, this was again the question, would you like to sell your practice at a discount today? The short answer is no. Nobody wants to sell at a discount, and nobody is selling at a discount. And if you look today, we don't have this massive glut of practices. So I think you're still in good shape. Thanks for the question.
I was on mute. What would you say to a fourth-year student right now that's going to need to look for their first associate job right after this pandemic ends?
It's a great question. So for all of the fourth years that are affiliated with our firm, as you know, we've got a ton, and a lot of these people are actually on the call today and were there this morning, of recruiters. And they're still actively recruiting right now to place you into practices across the country. We've had a number of you that have already accepted associate opportunities on the start date, whether it be June, July, August, September, whatever that date is. But you already have there's many people that are getting hired right now. Further that, there's an opportunity, as I had referenced in an earlier slide, to do Skype and Zoom and FaceTime and use this time to, again, interview virtually with people and keep all the communication lines open. Sure, there's going to be a lag in some practices. I'm going to suggest to you there's two. One practice type is going to say, hey, we need you right away as soon as we reopen up and so forth because our previous associate is gone, or just the demand that we will have with our existing base will be strong enough. You'll be ready to go as soon as we open. The other cohort is going to be saying, we still need you, but we might be slightly delayed, whether that be 1, 2, 3 months, with getting you enough work to ramp you right back up as those lagging portions that I mentioned come back. But overall, the opportunities that you had 6 weeks ago are still very much alive and well. Thanks for the question.
What do you recommend for the people buying offices closing post-COVID-19?
That's a great question. So this now gets into a big can of worms as far as we're still saying, continue on. Like there's so much going on right now with people as we speak, as I said, moving forward with their plans, with what they want to do and how they want to expand and doing the first acquisition. So by no means are we suggesting to you don't proceed. Absolutely proceed. If you're in a situation where you can maybe defer the closing date, if everything is closed right now, that might be a recommended course of action depending on where you are in the legal cycle of your purchase. But we definitely recommend, and we feel strongly that if you liked buying the practice before, there's no reason not to buy it now. Again, work with the closing date if that's part of your requirements. Thanks for the question.
What's your prognosis for those of us who are an associate dentist? How this will affect us? And thank you, great presentation.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Sure, there's going to be an effect in the sense of, as an associate, maybe the person that you were transitioning to maybe purchase your principal, or you were looking to purchase the next practice, and maybe there might be, again, a slight delay in those opportunities. Again, I'm more of the feeling there's not going to be a glut of practices. I think there's going to be a continued shortage of practices. So your opportunities as an associate going forward, they're looking just as good. And you always have those same things where, because the need for you, again, as we just get past that lag point, is still incredibly strong, I wouldn't be the least bit concerned as an associate. In fact, a lot of you guys are feeling a little sigh of relief that you don't have all the overhead that you're carrying right now as practice owners. But even those of you that are, again, practice owners today, feel good about the fact that this is all a temporary point in time. We'll all get past it together. So feel good.
I would like to thank you for all your kind words to Vic. We won't read all of those comments here, but he will receive all those comments later, and I'm sure he'll be very, very happy to see everything that you've been saying. It's better to buy a clinic or build your own, seeing that there is already a shortage of clinics to buy.
That is also such a good question, because I'm going to say it depends. And I'm going to suggest to you that it depends on a number of factors. Number one is, I'm going to say again, location, or which province and city or town you are. And if you're in a place that's, again, highly underserviced and so forth, we really love the idea of doing a startup if you feel that you're ready in your career clinically and organizationally to be able to do it. Underserviced areas, they definitely need another dentist to start up. Now, that being said, you might sometimes get a better deal on an existing acquisition because of that shortage of dentists working in that area. If you're in the more densely populated areas, again, like in Vancouver, BC, or in the Greater Toronto area, both work. We have a number of startups happening all the time, and we have a number of practice purchases transitioning all the time. The greater question you have to ask yourself is, what level of responsibility are you willing to endure? So again, if you were doing a startup where you bought land, demolished a building, built a practice, and now you're doing all the steps, the 47 steps from digging the dirt to having drills in the chairs, are you the person that is organized and willing to go through that? Because it is like building a house, I guess you could say. And the other aspect is, you have to be successful. To truly be successful, it's not enough just to do a practice acquisition, or certainly, I'm going to say even more importantly, a practice startup, unless you're, again, using all the power of metrics. Again, being social media connected, using the ability to acquire patients through, again, great clinical dentistry, blogging about it, writing about it, doing all those things. Again, you have to put the business hat on as much as you have to put the clinician's hat on when doing a startup or even an acquisition. So we love both. But really understand who you are, and certainly you can feel free to direct message us, and we can help you through maybe some of that decision making. But both great options still. Thanks for the question.
Crude oil is in the negative at minus 200% today. What do you think that means for the market?
I've been watching this kind of in between our day here right now and so forth, and it's an unbelievable negative. In fact, this up here right now, and I mean, when we look at markets right now, you're going to see something that we believe is going to continue, and that is extreme volatility. See, again, I'm going to go back for a moment. I'm going to use the Dow Jones, where it had gone to 29,000, dropped down to 19,000, bounced up to 24,000, and there's this euphoric feeling, again, as I referenced, of, again, things are going to be good again really soon, but then we have obviously all this economic lag that we still have to price in. So the short answer is, we're getting murdered right now on oil prices. It's going to be a price war like we've never experienced. This is not great for you guys. It's going to contract it even more. The long-term outlook on energy and oil is very, very strong, actually. As strong as companies like Tesla and the electrification and hybrid technology that's come today, we're looking at still a very extended period of time before we get off oil to power cars and homes and what have you. So longer term outlook for oil, very, very long term, not great. Mid-term outlook, depending on how OPEC and the Russians decide to price oil, that's the way our economy goes. In Alberta, we call it not the Canadian dollar, we call it the petrodollar, because that's how it's influenced by it. Thanks for the question.
Is it a good idea to buy a practice from the start, or better work as an employee first time, and then to buy a practice?
So if I look at, I'm gonna go back over the last 26 years of my career, and I'm gonna suggest to you that the vast majority of people graduating out of, let's say, any given class anywhere in the country, they typically choose the route of, if they're not doing a GPR or an AED, they're taking that route of saying, hey, you know what, let me be an associate for, on average, 2 to 4 years. And again, How many people have we seen historically graduate and go straight into a practice startup immediately, especially if they have, if they're not really completely up to speed on all of the responsibilities that will entail? It's often 1 or 2 people out of a class of 100. It is very, very, very small number of people. Those of you that know Dr. Jay Carrier have tuned into him on Dentistry Disrupted. He's an outlier, so don't use him as the norm as an example. But generally, for the overwhelming number of you, we highly recommend being an associate for a period of time before you start an endeavor into practice ownership. Thanks for the question.
6 to 8 weeks ago, I was planning an office expansion. Would you still consider that, or should I hold off for a bit, considering both patient flow and availability of financing?
So financing-wise, depending on institution, we have seen again a little bit of contraction on lending, but it's not full contraction. The banks, as I said, want to do business with you, so that's not stopped. Now that being said, if we're looking at you have something already in plan to continue to grow, we're still saying continue to plan it. It's again just depending on when you start it. Would I do the expansion and open up the doors tomorrow while we're in COVID at this moment in time? Depending on your financial status and situation, you have to evaluate that on your business plan. But mid to long term, and when I say midterm, meaning not very long from now, we would still highly recommend expansion, because if you are positioning yourself, that growth is going to follow. Thanks for the question.
A non-assignment office, should it be changed to an assignment post-COVID-19?
This is again one of those topics where we could debate this for a separate webinar for 2 hours on its own, between the pros and cons of assignment versus non-assignment. Me personally, I believe in the concept of assignment and not turning patients away purely due to the fact that we don't accept their insurance. When we look at bad debts again over all time periods in this country, and I'm comparing this over thousands of practices, the collection rate is about 98.7%. So only 1.3% in aggregate over all these practices default on the money that's owed to the dentist. It's such a tiny number. So think of it this way, on $1 million of gross production, it's on average about $13,000. So would you turn away a significant number of patients, especially post-COVID, that might need a little bit of help right now, and just say, hey, you don't accept assignment, great, I'm gonna move on to the next dentist? Not endorsing it completely, but I'm saying relook at it. If your mindset has never been to accept it, you may wanna relook at changing your mind about it, given what that 1.3% number is in actuality. Thanks for the question.
Do you predict associate salary will increase or decrease from this?
Associateship salary. So when we talk about associateship salary, we talk about percentages. So again, the standard percentage of compensation is 40% of collections. So again, that number has been it's been extremely stable for the last almost 40 years in Canada. We don't expect any change to that. And the reason I can say that with confidence is the last 40 associateship agreements and deals that have been accepted over the last 2 weeks that I've been looking at, 40 out of 40 were at 40% compensation, and not a single one less, and none of them more. So I think you can feel pretty safe in compensation not changing.
Do you see more equity-based relationships between associates and owners post-COVID?
I'm not sure about the question there as far as equity-based, so I would want some elaboration on it, but I'm just going to give you maybe a higher level view of principal and associate relationship.
It was Stan, the man, who asked if helped.
Stan, you're asking me the toughest question of the day, guy. So I think, again, there's two different principal associateship relationships that have existed since the dawn of time, since dentistry started. And I think one relationship is the mentor relationship, the let me help you as a principal elevate and grow and really, really be the best clinician you can be and teach. And there's so many of you that are, again, tuned in today and practicing around the country using that philosophy of bringing everybody else up around you, right? Even if you know that they're going to leave you as an associate someday, why wouldn't you give your best to those people as your colleagues? So that's one principal-associate relationship. The other relationship is you're their producer, and they may or may not view you strictly as how much production you can give them on any given day, week, and per hour. And the relationship is maybe just one of math and money. So nothing wrong with that. If you understand and the principal understands that that's what the vibe and the connection is, great, that's working. If you seek something differently in your relationship, those are the two different kinds. But the relationship between the two will only be a problem if you've got the wrong people associated with the wrong principals or organizations. Thanks for the question, Stan. Appreciate it, man.
I had heard two schools of thought to set up a high production clinic. One being optimizing your patient time and focusing on quadrant dentistry, doing more on one person, or doubling bookings and more efficient booking patient to patient. Do you have any thoughts or some strategies that you or your team would implement to help increase productivity?
Right. So this is now, again, a fantastic question, but I'm going to say the real answer lies in really patient-centric dentistry, meaning we're putting the patient first, and that's the kind of dentistry that matters and should only matter to everybody. So how much production we net out, of course, we all look at the numbers, we're all looking at those things. I'm not saying we shouldn't be relevant to those things. We should look at it, but not at the expense of, and how much more production we can squeeze out of a patient. If we're treatment planning based on insurance only, or if we're looking at an approach of saying how much can I maximize out of every relationship, ethically you might want to, again, revisit, is that the way you want to practice going forward? That being said, now the expansion with so much CE available to us in person, pre-COVID, and of course now on the web, and of course post, this is an opportunity for you to expand all of your skill sets and your C's. You can do more quadrant dentistry. You can start doing implants and what have you. So overall, both philosophies are going to work, but again, never at the expense of putting the patient. Thanks for the question.
I have a few questions that are very similar, talking about like startup practices or recently bought an existing practice. How do we reopen? What are the best strategies once COVID is over and we are going to reopen? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes. This is an incredible question because the answer to this question is going to be different than any other time we've ever experienced in 100 years. So please hear me out on it. It is going to be the responsibility of every single associate, hygienist, assistant, office manager, receptionist, principal, everybody, every single person on your team is going to have to be unified with a communicative message that's going to say, hey, during COVID, we're touching you, and post-COVID, depending on what those PPE requirements do or do not look like, what changes we see, of educating your patients and educating your team inside you. Even when we talked about the COVID risk score for your assistants, your hygienists at 99 out of 100, you need to make sure everybody feels safe in that environment. And how you can do that is through communication, of course. So what are platforms? Again, I know some of this is very uncomfortable for some of you guys because it's you guys were not meant to, or never thought that you'd have to be on film or on camera, but start to record it, put it out there for distribution, write stories, any way that you can start to educate your patients and your team on what you're doing and what you've done to create that safe post-COVID environment is going to differentiate you from everybody else that is not doing it. And it's a huge opportunity for you if you do choose the route of patient education. Thanks for the question.
You highly mentioned the importance of social media exposure for your practice. Platforms like Instagram are great for sharing cases. How do you deal with patient consent for sharing cases?
So again, everything has to, of course, be writing, and I'm not a lawyer, so I certainly won't speak to the legalities of what can be shared and what can't be shared under the PIPEDA Privacy Act. So I'm going to defer that to what the college's guidelines are and what the regulatory bodies would view as what you can and cannot share. That being said, it's an unbelievable platform where we see so many, of course, colleagues, of course, connecting, and so, of course, patients connecting to their offices. And we just can't discount how much this platform is growing, all of them. In fact, the #1 growing platform in research and reading so much of the content leading up to today's CE webinar, TikTok is now moving in an unbelievable viral way, and we can't discount the fact of how all of the power of these things will influence your patient acquisition in the future. So certainly keep it in mind to do it the right way under PIPEDA guidelines. Thanks for the question.
How the new technologies can help us after COVID?
This is, again, I keep saying this, another great question. You will see practices in all different varying levels of adoption of technology, of course. There's a number of dentists that still hand file. There's those of you that adopted rotary endo, a decade ago. Cone beams now have changed, of course, with cone beam technology, how implants are designed. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much digital technology and digital dentistry is becoming to the forefront. Companies like, and this is not a paid promo for Dentsply Sirona, but companies like Dentsply Sirona and its partnering companies like Patterson have gone very forwardly in trying to not only create this technology, but to make it very user-friendly. And all these people are here to support and teach you how to use it effectively and responsibly to deliver great, in some cases, single visit dentistry and get results that just could never ever in the past be delivered. So huge proponent of the adoption of technology. Again, 6 weeks ago, who could imagine that we'd be connecting with this many people live for an event like this. So certainly worth your investment of time and capital to look at what's best for your practice and your style of practicing dentistry. Thanks for the question.
Vic, we are reaching the end of this webinar, so I will give you one last question.
Sure.
What is the future looking like for recent dental students graduate? Will there be jobs for them?
Yes, the short answer and the big answer is yes and yes and yes. You should feel so excited, not only about all the opportunity that's not going away. This will pass, I promise you. I will put it in writing. This is being recorded. You guys can play it back in 5 years and be like, oh yeah, that guy said it'll pass. I promise you it'll pass. But I'm going to share something more importantly to you. The gift you have to deliver what you can deliver. How many people can do what you do? I remember every time I have the chance, and we have some first-year dentists that started in September of 2019, and I know some of you are listening and watching right now. And if you remember on August the 29th, 2019, I said something to you guys. I said, you won a lottery ticket because you studied hard and you had aptitude and a little bit of luck on your side to have the opportunity to enter into a dental program, or if you're direct licensing, you have an opportunity to finish that licensing and practice here in this amazing country. And this is a gift because you have the gift of delivering healthcare that 3.9 billion people are badly in need of, and only you can do it. And it's a small club. It's a really small club. So the ability to pay it forward, using your hands, using your skills with your mind to clinically treatment plan and employ people and build business and build wealth, like all of these things are all interconnected. But that opportunity is not going anywhere. It is going to flourish as it always has in the past and will continue to do so. I feel so excited about this. Nothing has changed with the outlook of where you and this industry is going. Huge excitement. Thanks for the question. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Vic, for such positive message for all of us. Thank you so much for partnering with Dentsply Sirona for this webinar. Thanks everybody who attended to the session. Remember, you will get a recording after 24 hours and we will get CE letters until the end of this week. Again, stay tuned in our social media. for more webinars like this.
Once again, guys, thank you so much all for tuning in from around the world in Canada. Really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll look forward to catching up and connecting with all of you again really soon. Be safe and be well. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Les. It was a pleasure to host this webinar with you guys today. Thank you, Dr. Razin.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much, guys. Be well.
Talk to you soon.